Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Deep Six Podcast, coming to you from the Pillow Fort. I'm your host, Steven Spevak, joined again by my wonderful co-host, Mr. Matt Barnes. Matt, how are you?
Hello, Steven.
Oh, you sound so clear this time.
Yeah, it's, the drive perfection, that's what I've been striving for all my life, and this is just another example of that.
For those of you listening, we should address the elephant in the room. For the past couple weeks, we've been recording Mr. Matt Barnes over the telephone because I have relocated to Florida for the time being, and
you also don't know what you're doing.
No, I don't.
That's important to point out too.
I'm an amateur at best. But we do want to apologize for the lack of audio quality over the last few weeks. But now we have figured out recording Skype if it doesn't shit the bed on us like it has before. So hopefully this works. Another thing I want to get out of the way before we really get into the episode is I want to thank our friend Mr. Alexis Rivera from Playful Gorilla, who recently, I don't want to say redesigned our graphics, but basically took the images that you see of Matt and I in our graphics and retooled them and gave them some new life. So I want to send a big thanks to him. You can check him out over at playfulgorilla.com. We'll link that in the show notes.
Yeah, I think that was pretty clutch, despite Alexis being a girl's name.
The funniest thing happened last night once my girlfriend saw the post that he made that I reposted, asked me how I knew her.
Right, and I was going to message you and say, is she hot?
So yeah. But no, we want to thank Alexis and the work that he did for us. But to the episode at hand, I think we'll start off with talking about the first look we've got at Cable from Deadpool 2. How's that sound, Matt?
Yeah, why not? I'll give you credit. That was a better transition than you're normally capable of.
Hey.
So, somebody's been working on their transition game since I hammered you for it before. I think that I described this to a friend of the podcast, Kevin Carter. I described it to him as Steven making a transition on the podcast is like watching an old man pick blueberries, or like a 16-year-old boy trying to fondle a boob for the first time. You're just kind of poking around looking for that transition.
I don't really know how to respond to that. But yeah, Cable.
Yeah, that was a thing.
Since the last episode, we discussed the first look we got of Domino. We weren't, super happy with it, but we weren't entirely disappointed. But I don't know how I feel about Cable. I'm a little indifferent about it.
I don't know. I'll say this. I wasn't unhappy with Domino. I just thought that it kind of was lazy. They clearly put a lot of work into the look for Cable. I kind of feel like, and I don't know if I don't even think I said this to you, but the way I kind of described the way that Cable looks in the first images we got is that it's Josh Brolin cosplaying as John Bernthal playing the Punisher.
I can see that. That's kind of hilarious.
Yeah, and I've been saving that one just for the podcast, so that's a first look for all you fans out there.
That's an exclusive.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems like everything that I've thought before about how Fox was going to mess this movie up by being involved too much is it seems very likely that could happen. And I know they pleased a lot of people with the way that Cable looks. A lot of people really like it. They thought, oh, wow, he looks really badass. But these are the same people that thought that Logan was good. So I don't know how much their opinion really matters.
You're never going to let anyone live that down.
Well, I mean, look, I fully admit that I have bad taste in movies. I admit to everything bad that I like. But a lot of these people can't even admit to the bad stuff that they like Logan. It's a shitty movie, bro.
Anyway, keeping on Cable, I think my biggest gripe with the images that we've seen is that he looks kind of tiny.
Well, I mean, Josh Brolin, obviously put a lot of work in for the role.
Yeah.
But, he's very much, I don't know, like a regular guy playing a character that's kind of larger than life in comics. Like he's like a big guy, and he's got the cybernetic arm and the fish eye, and I don't know. You just have a regular guy playing the part. He's going to look like a regular guy, just with a lot of special effects on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really hard to represent Rob Liefeld's visual style in real life because nobody's chest is bigger than, a 1967 Buick.
Larger than life, Cable. He's got the chest of a gorilla.
Fair amount of pouches, though.
Yeah, I guess. That's kind of why I went with, it looks like he's trying to pretend to be the Punisher for Halloween. I don't really get what they were looking for there. I mean, I guess the Cable model in comics has had, pouches and all kinds of goofy shit on. But, I don't know, it just doesn't really work for me, I gotta be honest with you.
However, they're not in the article that I have in front of me, but there were some set photos that came out that showed Cable on set, and he does have, I don't want to call it a cape, but he's got, a cape-like thing on him as well in the set photos. And
it's called a cloak, Steven.
It's not really. It's like covers like one shoulder and goes down to like his waist. It's really.
Is it supposed to hide his cybernetic arm until he wants people to see that he has one?
I didn't take notice which side the cover was on, but
neither did I. But I think that's a reasonable assumption. If it's
probably
one side of his body, he's trying to hide his enhancements.
I will say though that I like the fact that there's quite a bit of practical effects used for the character, because from the set photos we saw that the mutation area of the neck and everything on his face, aside from, of course, his one eye, is all practical. But yeah, I don't know. I'm going to hold out my judgment just like I did with Domino until I actually see these characters in action. And we'll go from there, I guess.
I don't know that we really need to wait that long. If you don't like it, just make your call that you don't like it right now. You don't need to wait to see how it is. I mean, obviously, we were going to see the movie. It's just, whether we're impressed by the characters or not, or the way they look. And so far, I'm not impressed at all.
And like I said, I'm still indifferent on it. I don't hate the way that either of the characters look, but I don't think from the images that we've seen that they look, all that fantastic. I would really like to see how they look on screen compared to how they look in a posed photo. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, once we eventually get a trailer or something of that nature, I think it'll be a little easier to decide if I'm for the way that these characters look or against it.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add to that. I think it's pretty clear where I stand on it right now, that I'm really underwhelmed by everything that they've shown, and I didn't really anticipate it being that good to begin with, so it's kind of meeting my expectations, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not super excited with anything that I've seen so far either, but I'm not completely downing it just yet. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. Keeping with comics, as it tends to be a theme throughout this podcast, go figure. Netflix has acquired MillarWorld, which is kind of, in my opinion, a big deal. But Matt, from what I understand, from what we've talked about, you don't see it as being that big of a deal.
I think it depends on what properties they're getting as part of the deal, right? Like MillarWorld already has film rights out there, for Wanted. And, I think that's the only one that's a question mark, so I'm going to get that one out of the way first. But they have film rights out there for Wanted. They have film rights out there for Kick-Ass. They have film rights out there for Kingsman. And other properties that haven't been developed yet. So, is Netflix going to be able to make shows, or do the rights for shows based on these characters, rest with those same studios? I think until there's more clarity to it, and, if Netflix can't use the biggest MillarWorld properties that everybody really knows that are household names, why is this a big deal?
Well, and we discussed this off air, but we don't necessarily know the contractual clauses for these films that have already been made of MillarWorld properties.
No, we don't. But I think you can draw reasonable assumptions that, a lot of the film rights might still be out there because, there's a new Kingsman movie coming out in a month.
Yeah.
And, we got a new Kick-Ass movie. I guess the Kick-Ass 2 was 4 years ago? So, that's a period of time where generally film rights still rest with, the rights holder as opposed to kicking back. Usually it's, with, the Marvel characters, it seems to be kind of a 5-year property thing where, somebody has to be making a movie within 5 years to keep the rights.
I don't know. I'm as in the dark about it as you are.
Well, I don't think anybody really knows, so I don't think that, us, jabbering about it is really, helpful or not helpful. I think it's an interesting topic to discuss, but I don't think anybody knows, including us, kind of what they have and what they don't have at their disposal. Now, I will say this is a big deal if, Netflix can go out there and they can make a kick-ass show, which I think that property would really lend itself much better to a show than it did a movie, even though the first movie did really well. But I think that, the second movie really showed that it's a property that needs more long-form storytelling to kind of play out the way it should. And I think that Netflix is the right company to do that at, that'll kind of just let them try things and do whatever they want to do with the property to make it good. So I'm kind of in, I want to see that. I don't really know a better way to put it. I guess it'd be difficult to make like a Kingsman show while, the Kingsman is, still a film franchise. But maybe, they could relaunch Wanted if they have the rights back. I think these big properties are things that they're going to have to do, at least in the outset, to get people interested in seeing some of the smaller Millar, world characters also involved. Kind of how, like, Netflix let off with Daredevil. Everybody knows Daredevil, but less people know Jessica Jones. Less people know a lot about Luke Cage. Less people know a lot about Iron Fist. But most people know Daredevil. So they led with Daredevil, and I think that was a really smart move. And I think if they're going to do the same thing with the MillarWorld properties, they need to lead off with the big one to start it.
I think something interesting to note is that in the press release that Netflix put out, Kick-Ass and Wanted and Kingsman are mentioned like 15 times. So,
well, they should be. I mean, those are the properties everybody knows. We'd agree there, right?
Yeah, but I think it's also interesting to note that they're mentioning them so much to think that maybe they do have the rights to use them. But
I think that would be, what we can draw from it, that they mention it a lot, so they probably can use them, but we don't know for sure yet.
I think it's also interesting to know that, of course, this isn't just Netflix, getting the licensing rights to these properties. It's Netflix literally buying out MillarWorld, so they not only get the rights to these characters to use them in Netflix shows, they own these characters now. So not only does that affect Netflix programming, but that sort of puts Netflix into the comics publishing game as well.
And I know that's a bigger deal to you. I just don't see Netflix going out there and putting out, 8 or 9 monthly books just because they were so interested in getting into the comic business. I just don't see that being the end result of why they did it.
No, I don't think that is a big point of why they purchased MillarWorld either. I just think it's interesting to know that they're technically a comics publisher now. So we could see them either taking properties that they have created on Netflix and publishing them as comics, or we could see them maybe attempting to put a comic out there to get an intellectual property out there and then adapting it to a Netflix program or something along those lines. Because within the press release here, it states that they're going to keep working with Millar to develop properties based on existing characters and new characters. So I think there's going to be a major effect comic-wise with this purchase.
Sure. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting if, they use the comics to kind of push forward more properties that they want. It's also a really interesting idea to backdoor characters in where, Millar can just conceive of a new character. And they can be like, okay, we'll make this TV show, and then he can make comics that, kind of support, and they kind of go back and forth. Kind of like an MCU where, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is supposed to be in the universe. The Defenders are supposed to be in the universe, but they're not really. But they could actually do that with the MillarWorld purchase. They can have everything all together in a show format, and they can also have the books tie into that, which Marvel doesn't do because Disney doesn't care about comic books. And I also think, like you said, moving Netflix properties into a comic book form is interesting too. Who wouldn't read a BoJack Horseman book?
I know I would.
Right. Like, I think I would read that. I can't think of any other properties that they have that are originals that would translate really well to a comic besides that. But I'm sure there are.
I think Stranger Things could translate to a comic pretty well.
Okay, I guess that's something.
if you're going to look at other properties that they have. I mean, I know you weren't the biggest fan of Stranger Things, but as just looking at properties that they have that could possibly be comic books, I think Stranger Things would be the only other one that I could think of.
Sure, that one could certainly work. But, I think that's an interesting idea, too. There's a lot they can do with it, right? Like, if they're going to try to actually publish comic books, there's a lot they can do with that. I think it remains to be seen whether they intend to keep this as a publishing wing and actually, make comic books monthly. I don't know that we've seen that that's going to be the case yet. I think, it'll be business as usual for a while because nothing has really changed. But, in a couple months down the line, we'll see how they really feel about being a comic book publisher.
I think another thing interesting to note about this purchase is to mention all of the MillarWorld properties that are within development as well, because I think there's at least 4 properties that have been in development for quite a while that we haven't really heard much about lately and could possibly have fallen out of development. I'm not sure, but I know Chrononauts, which was a pretty big deal for Millar, has been in development for, I want to say, about 2 years now. I think before that book was even put on the stands, it had already been optioned for a film. You had mentioned a couple others, Matt.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank right now. I think, what's the name of that book? Is it Nemesis?
Yeah.
I think that's been in development hell for quite a while. But these are things that I think tie into what I was saying about Kick-Ass and Wanted, that we don't know how those film rights that are out there already transition into being TV rights.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch and see how it plays out.
Because, if we use Marvel as a baseline, up until, last year? The X-Men TV rights weren't part of the deal for the X-Men film rights, so Marvel still had X-Men TV rights. They just couldn't do anything with it. So I think that we just don't know how that's going to work out yet. I think we have to see more or hear more or wait for Netflix to actually make a substantiated comment about what happened with the deal.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see once, like I said, once it all starts to actually play out and we do get a chance to see who or what characters they get to play with, at least on a television standpoint. Like you said, a Kick-Ass TV show would be awesome to see. I think that the movies were great, but to see those characters get a little bit more depth and to build a little bit more on an episodic format would be fantastic.
I just think it's a property that lends itself very well to TV. I kind of thought the same thing, that if Marvel got Fantastic Four back, I think that would make a really good episodic TV show rather than trying a movie again. You can actually do more character development with this family of heroes rather than trying to jam all that into a 2-hour movie and making them feel like a family over the course of 2 hours. It's very difficult to get that right, but I think a property like that can make a very good TV show.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it would be cool to see it be done in the same manner as they did Defenders, where maybe they give individual shows to characters or a couple characters, and then it kind of just builds to a more tied-in universe.
Sure, absolutely.
But it'll also be interesting to see what else they attack that's not, I don't want to call Kick-Ass a superhero property, but to see things outside of that hero vigilante thing, because I think that might wind up causing some conflict of interest with Marvel. I don't know how that necessarily would sit with Disney, but that kind of transitions into our next topic, where Disney is planning on pulling all of their film content from Netflix to start their own streaming service sometime. I believe the press release that I've seen here says in 2019.
Yeah, good for them.
The exact details of this have been kind of sketchy, because I know the initial report had said that the Marvel franchises and the Star Wars franchise would be removed from Netflix as well. But then later reports had removed Marvel from the information, and right now I believe Netflix is talking with Disney about keeping the streaming rights for Marvel films and Star Wars films.
Well, I mean, Star Wars film-wise, they only have Rogue One, right? Like, nothing else is on Netflix at this point.
Force Awakens is on there as well, I believe.
Is it? I've never even seen it on there, so that's news to me. But I've watched Rogue One on there more than once since it went up, I think, last month. But I've never seen Force Awakens on there. Regardless, and not even all the Marvel films are on there, so it kind of seems like, like a non-starter of a discussion. But
it's everything that's been released since Civil War, I believe. So Civil War and on is exclusively licensed to Netflix for streaming purposes.
Well, if you remember before that, though, like Iron Man 1 was on Netflix at one point. Thor was on Netflix at one point. Avengers was on Netflix at one point. They've taken things down slowly and haven't added them back on.
Well, I think it has something to do with the deal they struck after Civil War or before Civil War. I don't remember exactly when it was, but they pretty much, the deal, I think, says anything from basically Civil War on is exclusively licensed to Netflix. So while other things before were licensed to HBO for however long, or Showtime, or whatever they were licensed to, and then eventually wound up on Netflix, like you said, with Iron Man and Avengers and things of that sort, that deal made it so Netflix has the exclusive rights to them.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know. But, let's look at facts being what they are. Nobody's buying this Disney streaming service to watch the Marvel movies exclusively or the Star Wars movies exclusively. If you're a big Star Wars fan, if you're a big Marvel fan, you very likely own the movies already on Blu-ray or 3D or DVD, whatever the case may be. You probably own them already anyway, so watching it on Netflix would just be, like a luxury, like a laziness thing, kind of like how I use Netflix. Like, oh, I own this movie already, I really want to watch this movie, but I could just not get up and still watch it anyway. So what kind of foothold are they, they're going to try to talk Netflix, they're going to try to talk this Netflix deal is off, start their own streaming service, and then try to pitch that service to people who already own their films anyway. That's not your market for this. I think their market for this is, putting their entire animated library available to watch through the streaming service will get people to sign up for the service. Because a lot of that animated stuff isn't, it's not for sale, because it goes right back into the vault as soon as they sell it. Then they put it right back in. And it's not really available on any streaming service. So a lot of the animated library you can't really see anywhere, especially like the cartoons. It's just very hard to find those anywhere to watch. That's what they need to be pushing with this. Some of their live action stuff from the 90s, and like Mighty Ducks and stuff like that, and their animated library. That's what they need to be pushing with this. They shouldn't be worried so much about Star Wars and Marvel stuff, because the hardcore fan bases of those properties are fucking buying it anyway.
Yeah.
So you don't need to worry about the streaming service. These people could just say, well, I don't need to pay another $15 for another streaming service. I can just watch the DVD that I already own. I think that's just a little short-sighted. And it's not like that they don't have this kind of implemented anyway, because if you go on like a Disney cruise, they just play Disney stuff on the TVs 24 hours a day on a Disney cruise. So they already have this kind of as a thing they're already doing. So I think that's kind of why we're seeing some back and forth over whether, the Disney and the Marvel or Star Wars stuff is going to be leaving Netflix or not, because there's nothing really to be gained from pulling it from there. You're not really getting anything out of that. You're not going to sell this service based solely on Marvel movies and Star Wars movies.
I mean, you make a very strong argument there with that, and I don't disagree with you. Um, but couldn't the same be said for? I mean, I know my family alone has just about every major Disney movie that's been released on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever it is.
Sure, but
I
think
mean,
about, parents who are just having kids now that can't buy half of these movies because they're in the vault. And they come out of the vault once every 10 to 15 years, and they get sold for a couple weeks, and then they're back in the vault forever again. Those are kind of the people you want to pitch that to, where you can just, I want to go get some housework done. I'm just going to throw the Disney Channel on.
yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And I think that's kind of always been the stranglehold that Disney has had on that market with, releasing their films and then putting them back into the vault. And I think that might be the only way they really wind up selling this platform.
And we all know at least one parent who has a kid that they end up watching the same fucking movie all day, every day, because that's what their kid is obsessed with. But if you have this Disney streaming service where it plays one animated movie, you're right now, over here, we're watching fucking Aladdin, and now Sleeping Beauty's on. It's just one thing after another, and it'll just keep going. So, the parent doesn't want to, pop their eyes out after a couple hours of watching fucking Trolls.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see at the time of launch what the library looks like. It'll also be interesting to see, because I think it mentions in here that they're planning on creating original content for said streaming platform.
Well, I think you have to at this point.
Yeah.
Because if you're not making original content, what exactly are you pitching? You need to give reasons for people to keep signing up and not quit after a certain amount of time. The Netflix model where, Netflix has put themselves some astronomical figure into debt by creating original programming to get more people to sign up for the service. So I think that's just a natural part of the service, like CBS launching their service based on, we're going to have a new Star Trek show. And Warner is launching their service on, where we're going to have the new season of Young Justice. Like, these are things that people want to watch, so they're launching a service with these things that people want to watch, which is smart. But if you're just going to play the same old shit and not create something new, then those people that see that stuff that they want to see are going to leave right away after it's already done, airing.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for them to be launching a streaming service with something new and original and something that would draw people to come in and at least watch it and give it, a once over before deciding, hey, this is bullshit. Or if it's a service they want to continue to keep using, kind of goes along the same lines as like when the WWE Network was released, or even still to this day, you get a whole month free, so that gives you a pay-per-view, so you get to sit there and you get to watch a WWE pay-per-view for free and enjoy everything else on the network in hopes that, WWE will hope you'll come back and subscribe, month after month after month. So, I mean, it would make sense to have something worth watching exclusively to this service when it first launches. The release here says that Toy Story 4, Frozen 2, and the live-action Lion King will be exclusively on this streaming service.
Well, I mean, moving forward, anything new they make is probably going to be exclusive to that service. I don't think they had to state that.
I don't think you're going to wind up in a situation where premium channels like HBO or Showtime or things like that won't have Disney movies on them.
Well, the way I take that message is that that's going to be the streaming platform for it, but there'll probably be an HBO or a Starz release for all those movies. But when you want to find them to watch over and over and over again when they're out of HBO rotation, you have to go to the Disney service. It ain't going to be on Hulu, bitches.
But yeah, I mean, I guess we'll kind of get somewhat of a glimpse of what to expect from this service when they launch their ESPN streaming service sometime next year.
Well, I mean, not to get too far off on a tangent there, but this is the way that sports programming needs to go. Nobody watches ESPN anymore. For whatever reason, whether it be because ESPN's gone very, very political, What, they fired all their hardcore long-term sports reporters during the course of this year. ESPN isn't. They're not a sports channel anymore. They're the MTV of sports. They don't really talk about sports all that much anymore. They talk about social issues surrounding sports. So a la carte for sports is kind of where it has to go. Where, if you just want to watch NBA on ESPN, you can pay just to watch NBA on ESPN. I think that's just the natural evolution of the beast when it comes to sports, especially when, you look at NFL Sunday Ticket, and MLB has their baseball package, and NHL has their package, and, the British Premier League has their own package. That's kind of where it's going. It's been going that way for a long time, and ESPN is like the last person to realize that this is the way it's going. They're like, oh, well, I guess we have to fix this now. And but the way they're doing it is really weird. Like, you still need to have a cable subscription to be able to watch the ESPN a la carte service. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's kind of how it is.
I mean, I'm not a big sports guy, as we've all come to know over the last year or so that this podcast has been going. But on the side of saying that this is the way sports need to be going, I don't disagree with you.
I'm tired of listening to people talk about social issues surrounding sports when I watch sports as a release from the social issues I deal with every day.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see if it does wind up being a service where you have to have cable in order to use it.
That's the early report, is that part of their streaming service for ESPN is going to be that you have to already have a cable subscription, then you can access it and pay them more for it.
Well, see, I know it's interesting because, like, when you have HBO, you wind up being able to have HBO Go for free. Or you could wind up paying the monthly fee of $10 or $15 a month to have HBO Now.
Sure.
Which is basically HBO a la carte. It'll be... I don't see why it would be any different to do an ESPN service that way.
Well, I think it gets more into how TV works as a business. I think that's why this is happening, where, to have a cable channel on your cable platform, like Verizon Fios or Comcast or Time Warner, whatever you have, they pay a certain amount of money back to the producer of content for every subscriber that's subscribed to their content. So I think ESPN is getting a rights fee of like $6 per subscriber right now, which is traditionally really fucking low at this point. ESPN isn't a service people want anymore. So if people already aren't getting it through their cable provider because they don't feel like ESPN is a service they need, and these rights fees keep going down, they have to make a reactionary move to try to get more money back than they were before. So if they start this streaming service and charge $10 per subscriber, it's better than getting $6 from people who are trying to turn off your channel as it stands.
That's a good point. I would think that probably is somewhat of the basis why the WWE Network is the way that it is, where it's only $10 a month and you get the pay-per-views that you would regularly pay, $35 for, or even up to $50 anymore, I think, if you were buying it through, cable and pay-per-view. Because think about all the people that would pay $10 a month to have unlimited programming, or the people who are just going to go and put out $30 a month. You're going to wind up getting more people paying for the short, the smaller number, and instead of the larger number.
I think a part of that is that they measured up numbers. Like, we're doing 200,000 buys for a strong pay-per-view that's not WrestleMania, but can we do 1.5 million subscribers at $10 that aren't going to cancel, when some of these people are going to see a bad pay-per-view and then they're not going to spend $60 again next month. But we get the hook of them, paying $10 a month, habitually over and over and over again. There's less of a chance of losing customer retention in that. They keep viewers longer, and they also keep them on the hook for that $10. So, somebody who would have bought 3 pay-per-views a year is spending, what, $180, $200 on pay-per-views?
Especially if your pay-per-views that you're buying are the big, Survivor Series, right, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania.
So you're upping your subscriber count or your viewer count from, about 200,000 on a good pay-per-view to 1.5 million every month, spending a guaranteed $10.
It's smart. And honestly, going back to this whole Disney thing, if Disney were to follow in the footprints of the WWE as far as, the way they're going to lay out their platform for streaming, that'd be very smart for them to launch with pretty much every Disney movie ever made on there, and to launch with some original programming already ready to go. I think another thing that's very interesting about the WWE Network that I'd like to see on a Disney platform is an actual, I don't want to call it a broadcast feed, but an actual channel feed. So, of course, you can go on the WWE Network and click Live Now, and it'll be a continuous, broadcast of shows. I would like to see that done with the Disney platform. If
I'm sure with Disney, that's probably more of a possibility and a reality of what we'll probably get than what we get with like Netflix, where it wouldn't apply to do a daily stream.
Yeah.
Or with Hulu, where it wouldn't apply to do a daily stream. It just wouldn't make any sense. But with Disney, having all these film properties, having all these TV properties, all these, cartoon properties, they can do a lot with that. Just playing it every day and just, rolling out a weekly schedule for what they're going to play. And then they develop new shows. And, this new show is going to be on Wednesdays at 8, but then you can watch it, anytime after that if you want to watch it. So I think it's a great model. I don't know if it's something that I'd be interested in, because why would I jump over when all I would really want to watch is the Star Wars and Marvel stuff? And any Disney animated movies that I would want to watch, I already own those too. I think it's just, you're dealing with, these ingrained brands in America that, are just these big, larger-than-life entities like Star Wars and Marvel and Disney Animated and Pixar. You're dealing with these big entities that people know so well and they trust so well and they love so much that they just go out and fucking buy it. So you're trying to double dip on your customers. So I think for people like me, it's probably not going to be something I would be into. But I think they're going to get a lot of people, especially parents, that just want to have something to, keep their kids' attention for a while. And from there, if they develop new content, they can bring people maybe like me back into the fold just to see their new stuff all the time.
Well said. Keeping with Disney, though, a rumor I've seen floating around, I don't want to say so much a rumor, but more speculation of what could come from Disney as far as it comes to publishing comic books, because of course we all know that Disney is the owner of Marvel. And I've seen a lot of people, I don't know if it's just one particular article that's been being tossed around, but I've seen quite a few people talking about it. The possibility that we could see the end of Marvel directly publishing comic books sometime in the near future.
I don't even necessarily know that means that they're not going to do comic books anymore. They might just move to an all-digital platform and save costs.
There's a couple things that are mentioned in this article, and it's very long, so to pinpoint them all is kind of hard. But one of the things I did see in here was the mention of, since Marvel is directly publishing their books, they could wind up licensing the Marvel properties to, say, IDW or, any other publishing house, really, to publish those stories rather than publishing them directly. So basically licensing, like they've done with the TV properties, out to different comic book publishers. Of course, then you'll wind up having issues where one company's got the publishing rights for this and the other company's got the publishing rights for that, so we're never going to see them cross over, and we're never going to get our Avengers versus X-Men.
And then when they want them all back, they're never going to be able to get it all back because, DC has turned X-Men into a viable property again, or, whatever the case may be.
It's interesting to think that DC could wind up publishing a Marvel title.
Well, I mean, we've really looked at this topic a couple times now. DC they know what they're doing with comic sales right now. They're really making it work because they just give fans what they want.
Like the Fantastic Four.
Right. Well, if they can do it and make it work where Marvel can't seem to make it work anymore, or they don't want to make it work, whichever that might be out of those two options, if they can't or they don't want to, why shouldn't DC do that? Because there is a segment of the Marvel fan base that still wants to be reading Fantastic Four books. So you're giving them an option to go over to DC, and DC will be like, yeah, we'll fucking give you what you want. Here's a fucking family.
I mean, you did mention as well possibly going directly to digital and skipping the whole print the medium altogether. And we've seen that recently where Marvel has decided that there are going to be books that are published directly to digital. They're not even going to get a print release. And I think that might have been where this whole speculation started.
Sure. I mean, that could have even been the trial for it, where they're testing it out with a couple properties to see if it works, and then they'll move the whole format over to just all digital.
It's interesting to think about it, but also we can basically assume at this point, because they're not making a whole lot of money off of publishing comic books. It's not like they're going to shut down the publishing division and go bankrupt because they're not making money from it anymore, because there's not really money to be made from comics as it is. But they're basically publishing comics at this point to have intellectual property, and it's a lot easier to introduce intellectual property through a comic book because of how cheap they are to make, compared to, we want to introduce a new intellectual property, we got to go and produce an entire film or television show for it, things of that nature.
And Marvel has this conundrum, too, where if they want to introduce something new, they can't really do it in the X-Men books, they can't do it in Spider-Man, they can't do it in Fantastic Four, which is likely why Fantastic Four isn't even being made at this point. But if they introduce a new character in the X-Men series, then Fox automatically gets rights to that character. So they kind of have to just beat around the bush creatively. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of things like all these events that Marvel wants to be doing all the time, to try to build up characters to be bigger than they really are, faster, just so that they can get them, on the table to establish something new, to maybe get more sales out of a new book. And it just hasn't worked at all.
Yeah, I agree. They are really kind of painted into a corner with what they can do with trying to introduce characters, and either to get them on screen or to drive sales.
And this was largely Marvel's doing, though. They're the ones that caused it on themselves by not knowing how to handle a bankruptcy properly. When they were going bankrupt in the 90s, they just started selling off film rights to everything they had. At one point there was WB wanted to buy Captain America rights to make Captain America movies. And it could have all been different. But Marvel, retained a couple properties, but largely they just started selling things off to try to make some money to stay afloat and keep making comic books. And now we're at this area where, Marvel makes these billion-dollar movies, but they don't know how to fucking make a comic book now.
Well, yep, I think that's another big point of this article here, says that basically when Marvel was going bankrupt, it wasn't a comic book that saved them, it was films. And they're not wrong, but I think, and like I already said, the only reason they still publish comics is to have those intellectual rights to the characters, and to be able to introduce those characters without having to go through all the rigmarole it takes to get a character on screen.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think you're probably on with that.
And personally, I think the digital thing is where it's going to wind up, mainly because they get to keep everything. They're not paying, to publish, but they're also keeping all the rights to everything. So if they want to do something with a character, they don't have to jump through hoops. So, we licensed Spider-Man to IDW, and then we have to go through the whole loop of having to rearrange the licensing agreement with IDW to get Spider-Man to put him into this show or this movie. And all that sort of thing. I think it would probably be smarter to just keep everything in their own, library and just push it out digitally. And we've all seen that, I guess, that digital comics sell better than print comics, because print numbers, at least for Marvel, they're only selling their best books at a couple 100,000 copies, which...
Well, I mean, you have, the problem anymore with most people of, what do I do with a physical copy of anything anymore? I have to have room to put that somewhere or take care of it or whatever I'm going to do with the property after I'm done reading it. What am I going to do with it? And I think that going digital kind of, for one, you'll have access to it forever and you don't need to try to keep track of it. But it's more cost effective for the company. It's more cost effective for the consumer to do something, like Marvel already has this built-in platform that they can release all digital comics on. They can just do it through a Marvel Unlimited, which is a tremendous value for the customer already to get access to everything for, I think I pay $70 a year for Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah, and plus they also have their...
I'd be willing to pay more money than the $70 I'm already paying a year to get new product also.
I mean, yeah, I think anybody would. But they also do sell single-issue comics through a digital platform as well, where you don't have to pay a subscription. You can buy books you want a la carte.
Sure, of course.
And I don't see why, if they did push directly to digital, why they wouldn't keep it as it is now. I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens to the direct market if Marvel ever stops publishing comics.
That could maybe kill it.
It probably would.
I mean,
in all
Marvel
honesty.
books aren't, lighting the world on fire right now. DC might be able to keep it afloat for a little bit just by itself. But what happens when DC goes into a slump again? Then everything's done.
It'll be interesting to live in a world where there are no comic book stores. But it'll also be interesting to see how many different independent properties flourish, because they don't have to worry about, we're not going to print, so we're not going to be put in, the spotlight as much because, we're not sitting, next to the Marvel books or next to the DC books. We just have to worry about publishing our own stuff digitally. I think we're still really far off from ever seeing Marvel stop publishing books or the death of the direct market. But I don't think we're so far off from it that it couldn't happen within the next decade. But who knows? We've seen crazier things happen.
Yes, I agree.
I don't really have much else to add to this.
Well, there's nothing really to add. It's kind of a wait and see at this point. I don't buy that Disney wants to completely get out of producing comic books for Marvel. That's why they bought Marvel. They didn't buy Marvel just for the film end of it or the TV end of it, because that could go up, belly up overnight. It could be like the 80s action stars where they were all selling out theaters. Then 1992 hits, and where are these guys? So it's just that could always end at any point. Trends end all the time. When is the superhero movie bubble gonna burst? And when that happens, Marvel as a property is, almost kind of a net loss for them at that point, unless they keep producing comic books so it remains somewhat profitable for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think we could also be on the verge of seeing that superhero movie bubble bursting pretty soon. Probably sooner than we'll see them stop publishing comics. But who knows? I don't really know what else to say about this.
Don't got to. You said it all already, fam.
Yeah, it's all been said, right? I guess that's going to bring us to the end of another episode.
Already? That was it?
I don't got... You got anything else?
No, not really. It was kind of a slow week for geek news.
It started off strong with all that stuff with cable at the beginning of the week, and then Netflix buying MillarWorld, and then a little bit of a lull, and then Disney said, hey, fuck you, Netflix. And then, that was kind of it.
Yeah, the tail end of the week kind of had the shits to it, didn't it?
So, I don't really got nothing else.
Yeah, I guess that is it. How about that?
I guess come back next week when we'll wind up probably discussing Defenders.
Yeah, probably, if one of us watches.
And is SummerSlam next week?
Yes, it is. Next weekend.
Damn, I guess we're not going to be doing a preview show for that, but maybe we'll discuss SummerSlam as well.
You never know. You can work a little in there. Just kind of, talk it up. Talk wrestling raps with the boys.
But yeah, so come back next week. We'll talk Defenders and maybe some wrestling. Who knows? But until then, why don't you head on over to deep6podcast.com. There you'll find links to subscribe to the show if you haven't already, which if you haven't, do it. It's free. absolutely nothing. You don't pay a subscriber fee. You don't have to worry about any of that. You don't have to worry about Netflix and us getting into an argument and us pulling all of our shit from Netflix. You don't have to worry about that. Go subscribe. It's free. iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Podbean. We're on all of those and probably others. You can also listen to us through YouTube. So if you want to head on over to YouTube and search Deep Six Podcast, you can subscribe to us there as well. Just listen. That's all we want you to do. Anyway, you can also follow us on social media at Deep Six Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Matt, where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at @TheMattBarnes. I'm on Instagram at @TheMatthewBarnes.
And of course, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Steven_Spevak. And yeah, I guess that's going to do it. So until next time, that's been the Deep Six Podcast. We'll see you later.